Once upon a time, there lived a little boy named Danny who had a giant imagination. More than anything else in the world, Danny loved to build. He built with blocks. He built with branches in the yard. But his absolute favorite things to build with were old cardboard boxes. To Danny, they weren't just cardboard. They were blueprints for future pirate ships, grand fortresses, and roaring cars. But most of all, Danny dreamed of traveling back to the ancient past to see real, live dinosaurs roaming the earth. One evening, as the sun began to tuck itself behind the horizon and cozy twilight settled into Danny's room, he finished his greatest masterpiece yet. It was a time machine built from a massive box his dad had brought home from the store. Danny stepped back to admire his creation. The box was decorated in bright chalk. On the side, he had proudly written, "Go Time." All around the words, he had drawn gears, spinning clocks, and Roman numerals frozen in anticipation. But the most magical part? Danny had attached real, glowing buttons and switches from his dad's old tech gadgets. They flickered with a soft, inviting light. "All right, time machine. Ready for liftoff?" Danny whispered to himself, his eyes bright with the thrill of adventure. The room was so quiet, you could hear the crickets chirping outside the window and see the very first stars winking into the sky. The bookshelves, packed with his favorite fairy tales, and his plush stegosaurus on the shelf, watched him with quiet curiosity. Danny pressed the biggest green button. The box let out a soft hum, sounding exactly like a happy, purring cat. And the lights began to blink faster. Right then, Danny froze. He thought he saw a shadow move behind the plush stegosaurus. He carefully peeked behind the books. There, tucked right behind the toy dinosaur, sat a real, live, but very tiny dinosaur. He had a long, graceful neck, kind, soulful eyes, and scales the color of sweet mint. The little dinosaur looked just as surprised as Danny. He shifted clumsily from foot to foot and let out a tiny, soft squeak. "Whoa!" Danny gasped, catching his breath. How did you get here? Did my time machine actually work before liftoff?" The little dinosaur didn't answer. Instead, he just shuffled closer and nudged his warm, slightly bumpy nose right into Danny's palm. He was incredibly sweet and not scary at all. In fact, he seemed very friendly and looked like he loved adventures just as much as Danny did. Danny decided to name him Spike because the ridge on his back was made of cute, pointy spikes. "I get it," Danny cheered. "My time machine brought you here from the deep, ancient past. My dream actually came true." As if he understood every word, Spike tossed his head happily and let out a low, rumbling purr. Danny quickly scooped up his favorite blanket, the one patterned with the night sky, and spread it across the bottom of the box. "Spike," Danny announced solemnly, "welcome aboard the time machine. Hold on tight." Spike carefully wiggled into the box next to Danny. The time machine hummed to life with a cheerful buzz. Danny pressed the blue button, and it felt as though their box was soaring straight through the deep, endless night of time, flying past glowing comets and sparkling stars. Suddenly, the twinkling lights faded, and the box gently touched down with a soft thud. Danny and Spike peeked outside. Danny's heart began to pound so hard he could feel it in his chest. He gasped, his eyes wide with utter wonder. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. They were no longer in the bedroom. They had landed in a wondrous, ancient forest. The air smelled sweet and leafy, and everything was huge. Giant ferns towered over them like trees, and huge, gentle dinosaurs could be seen wandering in the distance under the soft glow of a prehistoric moon. Danny felt so small, but so incredibly excited. Danny and Spike climbed out of the box to explore. As they wandered along a mossy path, Danny spotted something sparkling on the ground. It was an unusual, smooth stone that shimmered with a faint, magical glow. "Look at this, Spike," Danny whispered, picking it up. He slipped the strange stone safely into his pocket. A little further down the path, they discovered a cozy, warm cave. Danny peeked inside and smiled. A kind mother dinosaur was gently tucking her little dinosaur babies into a bed of soft leaves. She began to hum a low, rumbling lullaby that echoed sweetly through the cave. The melody was so warm and comforting that it felt like the gentlest song in the whole world. Listening to the music, Danny felt his eyelids growing heavy. He sat down next to Spike, gave his little friend a hug, and closed his eyes just for a moment. When Danny opened his eyes, bright morning sunlight was streaming through his window. He was tucked safely into his own bed, buried beneath his starry night blanket. The time machine stood in its usual corner, quiet and still. Danny rubbed his eyes, confused. Was it all just a dream? He thought. But it felt so real. He looked over at his bookshelf. There, right where the live dinosaur had been, sat his plush stegosaurus. But as Danny looked closer, his heart skipped a beat. Tucked gently behind the toy dinosaur's ear was a tiny, glowing green leaf from the ancient forest. Danny gasped. He quickly reached into his pajama pocket, and his fingers brushed against something smooth and cool. He pulled his hand out and opened his palm. There, shining under the morning sun, was the very same unusual, shimmering stone. Danny smiled from ear to ear. It hadn't been a dream, after all. He knew one thing with all his heart. Tonight, his time machine would be ready for its captain again, and he and Spike would go on another magical journey.